Dobrodošli natrag. Znamo da je ovaj poslijepodnevni dio svake konferencije uvijek najizazovniji, ali ne brinite se, bit će i dalje i zanimljivo i uzbudljivo. Nastavljamo znači sa našom konferencijom. Sigurna sam da ste se malo u pauzi za ručak uspjeli provjeriti malo vijesti, malo ste sigurno bacili pogled na mobitele što se krije, tko je pregledao vijesti na portalima, tko na društvenim mrežama, jeste li pronašli neku konstruktivnu vijest. Nadam se da jeste, možda ne tako brzo, ali zaživjet će te prakse. Nakon što smo definirali problem, naučili smo što je konstruktivno novinarstvo i što su to konstruktivne vijesti. Vrijeme je da upoznamo i neke pozitivne prakse. Znači danas samo pozitivno. Kako srodne prakse solution novinarstva vraća nadu i osnažuje publiku, pokazat će nam Minal Takur, predstavnica Transition Media iz Praga. Please, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here after lunch. It's not easy. So I really appreciate you coming back on time. My name is Minal. I manage the Solutions Journalism program at Transitions. I'm going to be talking more about our organization. But just a disclaimer, I know since the morning we've had a lot of discussion about what's constructive journalism, what's solution journalism, what is the idea behind it, what can we do, what should be done. So I'm here to talk about not just what needs to be done or the possibility of doing solution journalism, but the fact that it's being done right now as we speak by our organization, an organization like ours around Europe, and to share examples with you, practical action-oriented examples, so you can actually see that this is not just big talk, but things are happening on the ground. So I hope you'll find it inspiring, and I've made sure to bring in examples, not from Denmark, or from Western Europe, or from the Western world, but really from your neighboring countries, so it reflects more to the context that you're working in, and you'll feel inspired. So, I have 3 questions to start my talk with, and I have only one instruction, which is you have 1 second per question to answer. So, when I reflect the question on the screen, don't think too much. You will have 3 options in front of you, and the first answer that comes to your mind instinctively, can you please just shout it out? Can we agree on that? 3 questions, 3 seconds, 1 second per answer. Let's go. In 1980, roughly 40% of the world's population lived in extreme poverty with less than $2 per day. What do you think is the share of the people in the world today that live then less than $2? 10, 50? Okay. 10 is indeed the right answer, but you'll be surprised to know that 87% of the people who've actually taken this quiz globally think that it's either 50% or 30%. In 1990, 58% of the world's population lived in low-income countries. What do you think is the share today? 9, someone said maybe 37. Just throw out what you think. It's okay. There are no 9? Okay. So the answer is indeed 9, but again, you will see 93% of the people globally who have taken this test answer incorrectly, because in their imagination, our economy is doing differently than in reality it actually is. Last question, and I think now you're kind of getting the gist of it, so I'm expecting the correct answer, but let's go for it. How many people in the world have access to basic drinking water within 30 minutes of their home? 70, 90? Anyone at the back? 90%, but again, 76% of the people who took this quiz globally, I repeat, globally, think wrongly. Why did I throw these questions at you? By the way, if you're interested to answer more of these questions and test your knowledge, this is based on a test called Gapminder. You can easily find it online, and it's a very good lesson in fact-checking yourself. So moving on, let's explore why do people often think of questions like these in a way which don't reflect the accurate reality of the world that we live in. I will not spend a lot of time talking about news avoidance because I think we've heard about it enough since the morning, but I do want to emphasize that news avoidance is a big factor for us thinking about the world in this way. But what I do want to focus your attention on is this. Spoken enough about news avoidance, but are we really understanding what is the effect that an exposure to an overtly negative news cycle is having on us? What are the hidden effects that we are not talking about? Let's start with a very limited understanding of the world, which we can see from barely 3 questions that we answer. We are not really in touch with the progress that the world has made. We're really thinking we are far behind on many, many, many parameters. Secondly, when we have a limited understanding of the world and we think that things are only going wrong, in the wrong direction, that there is nothing but doom and gloom and war and corruption and climate change, this leads to a concept called learned helplessness. Learned helplessness is when individuals like you and me, who are otherwise active citizens of a society, when they only read negative news or problem-oriented news, they start thinking, actually, I can't make a change. We as citizens can't make a change. We can't mobilize. Things are not going to change. And you train your brain to be learning that you are helpless and you can't do anything as a citizen, as a journalist, as a student, as a teacher, speaking to everyone in this room. And this learned helplessness is really, really bad for society and for democracies. Thirdly, what happens, which is currently happening, is compassion fatigue, because we are every day at crazy breakneck speed, seeing images of only things that are going wrong, only catastrophes, only crises, that we as human beings are really losing the compassion and the empathy that we have for each other. So when we have this kind of compassion fatigue, we also tend to avoid being active and engaged members of the society. We don't have empathy left in us for each other because we are helpless. So all of this is interconnected. And we've spoken a lot about erosion of trust as well. This is a problem that journalists here are facing, journalists outside of Croatia are facing. People just don't trust the news that they read because it's distorted. So this leads us to the question that I'm going to address today in my presentation. What if journalism didn't just show us what's broken, but what's working too? And this is what I would like to invite you to kind of go through with me today. And we do this by something that we call journalism's theory of change. And we will talk about journalism's theory of change by referring to dogs. How do we do that? We did talk about the watchdog function of journalism in the beginning of today's conference. But I want to invite you to reimagine this watchdog role of journalism. Not saying that it's not important, not saying that a lot of us don't get a lot of drive and passion by wanting to expose scandals and bring down governments, which I'm not saying is unnecessary. But how about instead of only being watchdogs and only being the lighthouse to things, shedding problems on things that don't work, we also act as guide dogs. And what does a guide dog do? As a guide dog, you are not only telling people what's wrong, but you're also diverting their attention to what we say action-oriented news. When you're talking about progress, when you're talking about solutions, you are actually guiding people to examples and case studies of progress and showing them that change is possible and how you and I as citizens can contribute to it. And this is basically news that you can use. And when a journalist, or when we as media practitioners play both these roles of a watchdog as well as a guide dog, that is when you present to your audiences what we call the whole story, the whole truth. Things are bad, yes, but there are people, there are organizations, there are stakeholders that are working together to also bring about change, and change is happening, and we are existing in both these realities at the same time. So why not highlight both of them with the same rigor? How do we do this? We do this by practicing solutions journalism. And what is solutions journalism? Not very different from constructive journalism that we've been speaking about. It is rigorous evidence-based reporting on existing responses to social problems. The focus is rigorous, evidence-based. We are not getting paid by an NGO to do a good PR piece for them, but we are really using the same rigor that you would for an investigative journalism piece to focus, highlight things that are actually working. And bear with me on a bit of theoretical bit. We have 4 pillars, which we kind of consider, if I'm being very prescriptive, as the cornerstone of solutions journalism. The first pillar is that the story always has to focus on a response. It's not about what one person did. It's not a hero worship story. We are not glorifying the efforts of one person, but a systemic response which institutionally changed something. That is the focus of the story. The second pillar of solutions journalism is evidence. Evidence of what? Evidence of impact. To prove that we've done our research to show that this solution or this response is actually creating impact, and you can do it by qualitative data or quantitative data. The third pillar, very important, is insights. Why are insights important? You're not just telling your readers in a story how was the solution implemented, but it's really the secret sauce behind what were the factors which allowed people who are involved in the implementation of a solution, which led the solution to be successful. So that if someone else, let's say we talk about a solution in Zagreb, but maybe someone in Split is having the same problem, when they read about these insights, they can replicate it in their own context. That's why it's very important to enlist all the methods, all the steps that were taken for this solution to come to life. And last but not the least, limitations. And limitations is also something which clearly separates solution journalism from activism, from PR, from hero worship, from happy, fluffy news. Because when we talk about limitations, we first of all are not saying we are endorsing one perfect solution, because we are credible journalists. We've done our research well. And secondly, it's also important because speaking to the third pillar of insights, when there is a community who would like to get inspired by the solution that you've spoken about, and they would like to implement it in their own context, once they know what were the limitations and the challenges faced by this other community that successfully implemented this solution, they will be aware of it. They will prepare for it. If you're writing about a story on how a town tackled air pollution, but if you say the limitation was the funding of the program might run out. Air pollution still continues because vehicles are continuing to pollute, even though industry pollution has reduced. These kind of limitations really give your story a lot of credibility and lessons learned for people who want to do the same. So not only are you doing a good job as being a journalist, but you're kind of being a catalyst in social change by giving people the tools to create that change. Why do I talk about this with so much authority? Because this is what we do at our organization. I work for Transitions. Transitions is a media development organization based in Prague. And the main focus, geographic focus of our work is Central and Eastern Europe. That's why also I'm here with my colleagues who are sitting in the second row. And we, since 2018, have been the official partners of the Solutions Journalism Network, which is the US-based organization responsible for coming up with the SOJO methodology. And since 2018, me and my colleagues have been going around Europe and the Caucasus, kind of preaching this gospel of SOJO and helping newsrooms integrate solutions journalism in their everyday practice. And if you will see, we have a knowledge center, we write a blog about it, we have a lot of resources, we have our own magazine where we publish solutions-oriented stories. So I would highly recommend to check it out. These are some guides that I just put if you would like to check them out later. But what I do want to focus your attention on is a particular program which we experimented with, and I can say safely that we were kind of the pioneers for it. We have been working on a 2-year program called SOJO Europe, and now we're working with around 32, 33 newsrooms across Europe. I've listed some of the countries here. And we have made sure that in our program, our focus is on investigating solutions. So all the training, all the mentoring, all the grants that we've provided to the newsrooms we work with are focused on investigating solutions so we can inculcate this culture in the newsrooms and on climate reporting. I want to quickly take you through some examples so that you can see that what I'm talking about has actually been successfully implemented, and newsrooms and freelancers and journalists across Europe are doing very good solutions-oriented stories. This is an example from Lithuania, which talks about how Lithuania, the government, has managed to halve its suicide rate. I'm happy to share all the stories with you if anyone wants to read the entire pieces, but this is just a very quick snapshot of all the work that's happening in the solutions journalism field. This is a story about a Moldovan village which has done a really successful energy transition into green energy. This is a story, again from Moldova, about how a social enterprise has managed to give jobs and include people with different abilities into the employment sector. This is a story from Bosnia, which is about an initiative run by the government, which is helping women who have faced domestic violence reintegrate into society. They're giving them legal and psychological support, and how. This is a story from the Czech Republic. It's about a story where you have support given to families of the Roma communities, and especially in terms of their kids integrating into the society and into schools and the psychological development. And how did the program happen? This really important to talk about this, because I'm sure a lot of you must be thinking, okay, then solution journalism probably is only successful in places which are more stable and have peace. But at Transitions, we've been working in Ukraine for over 5-6 years now, and I can confidently tell you that solution journalism is also possible in active conflict zones, in post-conflict zones, and even more important in these areas, so that we can reframe how we talk about conflict. Not just talking about destruction, but also highlighting due coverage of the resilience of the local people living through that conflict. And this is a story coming from Ukraine, a solution story about how a group of therapists came together and started doing online therapy sessions to give psychological support to Ukrainians. Another example is also how drones are being used now in Ukraine by tech startups who are creating these drones to detect landmines. One last example that I'll share with you is to show that cross-border solutions journalism is not only possible, but is being successfully practiced. This is an example of LRT, which is the Lithuanian public broadcaster. We did a story with them in which we encouraged the Lithuanian journalist who wanted to do a story on inclusive education to look around and go to countries who had a successful model of kids with special needs. The journalist traveled to Ireland and to Iceland. Not to say that we can copy what they do, because Lithuania has a very different context, but to create a story on how these two countries did it and what can Lithuania learn from it in their own context. And the background of this is that Lithuania, when the story happened, was actually debating a law on inclusive education for kids with special needs, and this was exactly what the country needed. This is another example of a solution story, which was about parental leave, done by an organization, a newsroom based in the Czech Republic, looking at examples of Germany and Spain, and what can the Czech Republic learn from them. Very good example. It was a 5-part series, really, really good audience engagement. This is a story about climate, also done by a Czech newsroom, about what the Czech Republic, especially the city of Ostrava, which is bordering Krakow, can learn from Krakow to tackle air pollution. Also really, really well done story. If you're interested in reading more of these kind of stories, I would highly recommend you to go to our Sojo Europe page, where we still have a lot of ongoing publications of investigating solutions, solutions journalism, climate solutions. And one story that I would like to highlight here is a cross-border solutions journalism collaboration, which was done between Spain, Romania, and Ukraine. So we had newsrooms from these 3 countries who came together, and they did a story about how can we keep our children safe from online violence. And first, they talked about what the problem was, so people are aware of it. And then the story was a cross-border collaboration where we had successful examples from all 3 countries of how they were tackling this problem, either institutionally or socially or psychologically. So much to learn from each other. No reason to say we can't solve this problem. This is what we are trying to highlight through our program. And then a question that comes to our mind is, what if we investigated solutions with the same depth and the same urgency that we do with problems? Why do we always hold investigative journalism in this very high pedestal, but when we talk about solutions journalism or constructive journalism, we suddenly forget that it's also critical? It's not just positive. The positiveness comes as an impact of reading the story, but the story itself is very critically done. It's crucial, it's rigorous. So that's why we don't even say investigative journalism. We just say investigate solutions, investigate problems, because the methodology is the same, the end result is different. Very briefly, what is the difference? Investigative journalism has a focus on who's causing the harm, needs to be highlighted in a lot of cases. Solutions journalism focuses on who is fixing the harm that has been caused and how. Investigative journalism talks about what's broken in the system. Again, very important to talk about. Solutions journalism talk about, but where is the system working better and what can we learn from it? And lastly, investigative journalism tries to play a bit of the blame game. Again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. It also has to be done. They're talking about who's responsible for what went wrong. But solutions journalism is talking about if something went wrong and something was done about it, how can we replicate it in our context? What are the limitations? What are the evidence? So, when we talk about accountability, when we think that the accountability function of a watchdog journalist is really important, why don't we rethink that accountability journalism is also essential to solutions journalism? Because solutions journalism shows that there is a problem, but it's not impossible to solve it. However, here is a story on how it was solved, so it's unacceptable. So the accountability still remains the same, just the framing of the accountability has changed. Why, again, do we need to include a solutions angle? Because there is no way now that any leader can say, oh, I have an excuse for why we can't solve the problem of a housing crisis in the Netherlands, let's say, where I live, and that's actually a really big problem there. But to say someone else is doing it, and what can we learn from them? So instead of this atmosphere of learned helplessness, you are creating an atmosphere of hopefulness, an atmosphere of hope and agency where you're giving people reason to re-engage with their public life, and you're giving people a re-engage in democracy, democratic resilience, and hopefully we'll be at a stage where we don't have to complain that people have given up, because we are not giving them information that makes them believe that there's a lot of reason to give up, but we're giving them information to believe we have so much more to achieve together. And I would like to, this is the last section of my presentation, because I know impact is something that we consider very highly through our journalism, and this is to show you that solutions journalism is capable of making really big impact. The story that I had shared with you before of this Czech newsroom, which did a cross-border story on what can the Czech system learn from the Spanish and the German government when it comes to parental leave. The journalist who did this story was actually invited by the Czech Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs to talk about their project in the parliament and tell them, what did you learn and what can we learn from you? Because we accept that things are not perfect and we want to make a change. So as journalists, you're really doing a very big job. Second example of the impact is the story where I mentioned the journalists from Lithuania went to Iceland and to Ireland to talk about inclusive education, were also invited to a panel. And they were also asked to tell the government and stakeholders and people who were working in the education sector, what can we learn and how can we implement it in the Lithuanian context. Lastly, the most recent example out of the many examples that I would love to share with you, but I'm kind of racing against time here, is this story that we did as a part of the Sojo Europe project by the Dutch newsroom Verspeton. They did a story on the problem of chemical pollution, especially when it pollutes water. And they did a story where they saw how actually this problem was being successfully tackled in Belgium, which is right across the border. Once the story came out, the local councillor in Rotterdam read this story, took it to the local council and said, guys, there's actually a solution right across the border. Why are we not discussing it? what can we do to implement it? So not only was the story picked up in the council, but the residents who were affected by losing their land to water pollution actually got financial compensation. And this kind of story is only something that comes to light when you're talking about hardcore problem-oriented journalism. But just to tell you that this kind of impact is also possible with solutions journalism. To back up whatever I said with research, and this is really the second last slide, trust me, research shows that solutions journalism leads to increased engagement. There is evidence that people spend more time on solutions-oriented stories. Of course, the mental effect in terms of a positive outlook towards journalism itself remains the same. Also very, very important is the increased intent to share, and this is to go back to the very toxic cycle of KPIs, which I understand a lot of us as journalists are bound by it. Our jobs depend on it. I'm not going to paint a rosy picture and say, forget about it. I know we have to manage everything. But solutions journalism actually has proven, based on evidence-based research, that people tend to even share solutions-oriented stories more than problem-oriented stories. So it also works in terms of monetizing this content, in terms of sustainability, in terms of profit. But of course, it takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. And to wrap it up, I will leave you with a quote that is very popular in the solutions journalism community of practice, which says, "Problems scream, solutions whisper. So let's tell the whole story." Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minal, for showing us that there are solutions. Thank you so much. Kao što znamo i kao što smo danas već mogli čuti, većina urednika se žali da ne znaju kako će privući nazad mlade generacije. To je nekako najveći problem koji je postao. Nekako smo mi stariji koji radimo već dinosaurusi za ove mlađe. Z generacija gotovo uopće, kao što smo čuli, ne prati medije. Ako ih i prati, čini to stvarno minimalno. Mainstream medije, naravno mislim na njih. Možemo li mi ih ipak nekako zainteresirati? Možemo li privući njihovu pozornost? Možemo li pronaći neke dobre prakse i primijeniti ih ponovno mi u Hrvatskoj? Sad sa takvim dobrim idejama koje bi nam možda mogle pomoći u budućnosti s konstruktivnom transformacijom jednog medija u Njemačkoj, a to je Deutsche Welle, i jednom posebnom projektom kojim se ovaj medij uspješno povezao s turskom mladom publikom, upoznaće nas Çare Özdemir, urednik projekta Plus 90 na Deutsche Welleu, koji će za čas doći na pozornicu samo dok mu stave mikrofon. Evo ga, samo što nisu, dečki brzo rade, spretni su. Čare, the floor is yours.
The remote. Where? Thank you. This is the largest ever presentation that I'm ever making. So I am coming from Berlin. Deutsche Welle is based in Germany. It's Germany's public broadcaster for international audiences. And I'm Turkish. I was born in Istanbul, have been living in Germany for the last 8 years. I worked in different news institutions before. And then after having joined Deutsche Welle, we have launched this YouTube channel in 2019, which I will go into more details. And but before going into that, like, all the discussions that we had since the morning are very inspirational and very complimentary, and I'm hoping that this presentation is also be complimentary, because I'm going to talk about, like, we talked a lot about theory and the intentions, and I will give you some concrete examples from what we're doing in our channel, and I will try to dissect all these examples and elevate all these constructive discussions that we had before even we went further. But before doing that, I am encouraged by the diagrams that I see in the cinema theater that a nerd must have been designing this. I see all of these science fiction and fantasy movies diagrams all around, and then as a sci-fi nerd and a dork myself, I cannot help myself giving an example from sci-fi series based on a book series called The Expanse, and there's a catastrophic event happening in 200 years on Earth. I'm not going to spoil it. And then there's this one line that I really love, like, in the face of a catastrophic event, we people are being dispersed, and the only way that we get together later on is to be able to find someone that we can rely on and someone that can rely on us. And we start as an individual, and we're a unit of 2, and then we're in a unit of 3. And that's what makes us tribal. We're tribal in the end. And tribalism is always being denoted as something negative, but in this context, a tribe is actually a place, a group of people that spreads the knowledge. And since the morning, I've been seeing people belonging to the constructive tribe, because when I started this, there were many fewer people in this field, and I see more people, and it gives me the confidence that we're all belonging to the same tribe. So that's very encouraging, and that's very promising for me. And so what we do in Deutsche Welle is, it has been going through a constructive transformation. So I can talk about what the general structure is like in Deutsche Welle, but I want to talk about my own project. But first of all, what Deutsche Welle does is that they launched this fellowship program in collaboration with the Bonn Institute, which was mentioned by Ulrich in the morning. And they are selecting 10 journalists every year across Deutsche Welle programs, platforms, channels, and offering them a year-long fellowship. That's like not a full-time fellowship. And I was lucky to be selected in the first cohort of that fellowship 3 years ago. And one of the first things that I learned was that we've been doing constructive journalism intuitively as journalists without really knowing it. It was just a matter of time and understanding that we started naming it. And once we started naming it, we managed to see it more in a mindset that we can be more actively and consciously seeking that kind of a journalism. So far, more than 40 journalists at Deutsche Welle have finished this fellowship, and I'm one of them. And one of the expectations is not only equip ourselves with this knowledge, but also go back to our teams and spread the knowledge, the so-called constructive ambassadors. So this fellowship has been doing a lot of positive impact within the house, we call it. And I'm going to talk about my own experience. So what I do, this YouTube channel that I'm talking about here is called Plus 90. It's a Turkish language channel for the audience, Turkish-speaking audience in Turkey. And that's a little bit surprising to see that, because Deutsche Welle is launching a channel, but not only itself, but also alongside 3 other public broadcasters that I'm going to come here soon. They got together, actually, let me show. Deutsche Welle, BBC, Voice of America, now defunct, but we still have it on the list. And France Media Monde, France 24 are on board. And 3 of these institutions have Turkish language channels already. And only France 24 doesn't have, but they have an English one that we adopt stories from. So, like, why do they get together? Why did they do that, although they had, like, Turkish language channels and then launched this? The idea was Turkish media landscape is unfortunately very, very polarized. The country is very polarized, and the media, independent media, is suffering. Just an example, 95% of the Turkish media in Turkey is owned by either the government or the government affiliates. And that's an insane number. So when you have that insane number, if you're trying to do good journalism, you're fired, you're exiled, and so on and so forth. That's one factor for all of these getting together. And another factor was that news are news, but how can we connect with the younger audiences? Because the target audience of this channel is from 14-year-old to 25, primarily. So we have to do something differently, because we talked about news avoidance in Croatia, and in the same report, actually, the news avoidance rate in Turkey is the same. And And I also don't like using the term news avoidance because it's putting the blame on the audience rather than putting the blame on the journalist. Shirish Kulkarni, he's a brilliant journalist and researcher, has a great term for news avoidance. He's using the term sense seekers rather than news avoiders. And we're trying to reach out to the sense seekers here. And in the last 6 years, we had a colossal growth on YouTube. We reached almost 1 million, and that's an amazing number for us. And it didn't come there in one day. And it doesn't do only constructive journalism, but constructive mindset has been a part of our curriculum, a part of the way that we think about things all the time, over time. So that was the transformation that we've been going through. This is a part of my team, and we're missing 5 people here. So as you see, for us, reaching out to women is very important because women on YouTube and other social media platforms are not represented as much as they should be. That's one of our findings. Another finding is that marginalized communities are not as much presented as they should be. And we were trying to tap into these 2 fields as well as, general interesting topics of the youth and be able to communicate our content in a way that they can actually be won back so that they're no longer frustrated sense seekers, I would say. And I will give you 3 concrete examples of 3 stories that I was the commissioning editor of. And I want to highlight the constructive debates that we had and the end result. And this is some sort of a learning by doing exercise for me. And the first stage is like we work with freelance reporters on the ground in Turkey, and we're managing the whole project from Berlin. And when we receive a pitch, we evaluate it from a constructive angle, if it's possible, if there's a room for that. In this example, this was from 2 years ago. It was the 100th anniversary of the Turkish Republic, and everybody was covering it in a fanfare moment. And we were like, what can we do about this centenary of the Republic in a constructive way, without jumping on the bandwagon? And the idea was that, why don't we just speak to 6 people, because Turkish Republic has 6 foundational values that I'm not going to go into detail, and what do these values mean for the youth in Turkey coming from 6 different perspectives. And the entire video was trying to get the kind of Turkey that they want to live in and find a common ground, even though they're coming from very different political views in a very much of a polarized society. That was a success. We had such a great positive response. Another example that I want to give is how can we plan a story constructively. So there was this idea. In Turkey, also, headscarf is an issue. It did not have the constitutional protection when it comes to choosing to wear a headscarf until recently, and still so many safeguards are not in place. So if you are a woman wearing a headscarf, you will not be able to go and work in the justice system while wearing it. You couldn't be a teacher, you couldn't be a doctor, so that was really exclusionary. It has changed over time, but still not on the desired level. But this is one aspect of it, because on the other side of the coin, there are also women who choose to ditch their headscarves. And since it's a very controversial issue, it's very difficult to tap into this. And when the idea came, how can we do this in a way that would give agency to the people that we're talking to while protecting their identity, but at the same time promote understanding and personal reasons rather than petty political debates that are going into either direction. And it worked really well. We just let them talk about what they feel without going into political debates. And also we invited a feminist sociologist to comment on it, who's wearing a headscarf, defending the idea of making a personal choice, whether to wear it or not. 65% of the viewers were women, one area that we wanted to tap into. Over 300,000 views. is a good number for our standards. So like, it gives us the confidence that we can actually do constructive stories and then get a lot of positive reaction and with the numbers. And one final story, we were talking about solutions at length, and like, how can we develop an only solution format? That was a question that we asked. And we came up with this one solution format. We published 3 stories already. In each episode, we're finding an issue that the youth, the target audience, might be interested in. And then we're just like dissecting that with the 4 pillars that we were just talking about earlier. We're identifying the response. We're trying to find evidence from other places. We're providing insights and working solutions. And also we establish the limitations on how not all of them are possible to implement all the time. The first video was on social media addiction amongst the youth. The second video was why the uni graduates cannot find jobs easily and what can they do about that. And the third video, how can we eat healthily while we're on a budget? So these are all like, very simple topics that might make a change in people's lives. And sometimes we also work on longer stories, but turn them into short formats. This story was about people with achondroplasia, which also is known as dwarfism in society. This lady was talking about how she's feeling in the society when she's walking. And this story was not constructive per se. It wasn't it didn't have a constructive mindset at the background. But the way that she was expressing herself in this segment of the video was so empowering and was so powerful in terms of in terms of making people understand how she's feeling. So we were trying to emphasize an issue that so many people are feeling powerless in the society. And after having established these examples, I just want to talk about the feedback that we're receiving. Because for us, traffic doesn't mean impact. That doesn't necessarily mean it's important. The solution stories community are sharing their experiences. So that's a great feedback for us because that's something that we want to communicate with them. In the Republic story, people were so happy that we were focusing on the common ground rather than the dividing factors in the society. And the headscarf story, we had like a colossal support for the protagonists, no matter where they're coming from. And what we were trying to prevent news avoidance. And this is a survey that was conducted amongst our audience 2 years ago. It was an independent survey. And I want to share some highlights from the responses that we got, which gives us the confidence that we're on the right path by doing more constructive journalism and solution stories. And I just want to end it on a high note, because how to get there? We're listening to them. We're doing a very active community management. We are showing them that we listen to them, and later on we put them at the center. There was a story that we adapted from Frans Venkat about men over 30-year-old living with their parents in Italy. That was an adaptation, and our audience loved it. They were like, you have to do a story on the men over 30-year-old in Turkey living with their parents. And this guy that you see on the thumbnail was one of the people who commented on the Italian story. We found the guy, went to him, he was like, do a story about me. We were like, okay, we're going to do a story about you, and we're going to put you at the center because we listen to you, we show that we listen to you, and we put you at the center. Thank you.
Thank you, Čare. Imamo još dobrih primjera, jer znate kako se kaže, pametni uče na tuđim idejama, pa ćemo tako i mi nastaviti dalje učiti na tuđim dobrim i konstruktivnim primjerima. Kako redakcije diljem Europe mijenjaju način izvještavanja i što bismo mi u Hrvatskoj mogli naučiti od svih njih, to je tema našeg idućeg panela. Ja sam sretna što mogu prepustiti mikrofon svom kolegi iz Jutarnjeg lista, Filipu Paviću, a on će vam onda predstaviti i sve ostale sudionike panela. Filipe, izvolite.
Okay. Dobar dan svima, ja ću nastaviti ovo na engleskom da nas mogu i naši sugovornici razumjeti, a vjerujem da vi nećete imati problema sa tim. Okay. My name is Filip Pavić. I'm a journalist from Jutarnji list. We are here to primarily talk about how solution-based journalism functions in practice. So we heard about, from all the presentations, we heard a lot about theory, but now I think that all of the journalists here and maybe journalism students are asking the same questions. Okay, how can we adopt this approach in our daily work? And maybe most importantly, how can we, in a sense, make our editors see that this is a worthwhile endeavor? So I'm sitting here with 4 journalists all across Europe who have different approaches, who have different newsrooms, and I'll make a short introduction. Sophie, you are a French freelance journalist. You do this for how much years now?
A journalist?
No, solution journalism.
5 years.
5 years.
5
and
years.
You also are a trainer.
I am a trainer. Yeah.
Okay.
Freelance for TV and trainer, solutions trainer as well.
Okay. Beside you, Charuk, we heard your presentation. We know about your project. And this is Assunta. You are a freelance journalist from Italy, and you are also a founder of Solution Journalism Network, right?
A constructive network, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We
okay.
are.
And Leslie Jeske, you are a Dutch journalist, and you have you have an interesting collective that's sort of an experimental journalism, and you outsource your news to other newsrooms. Am I right?
Yeah, we often collaborate together with bigger newsrooms, but we publish more stories ourselves now, and we're in the transition to become more of a publishing organization as well.
Okay, we will get into everything that you do. But maybe the first question to get a sense of what you do and how you started, maybe you can, and we can start with you, Sophie. We can see how maybe what's the first time you heard of solution-based journalism, constructive journalism, and can you maybe pinpoint an exact topic or story that you did that you finally realized, okay, the traditional approach to journalism is not going to work. I need to find something else. And maybe the solution to that was solution journalism.
Yeah, in fact, I used to be an investigative journalist myself in France for French television for many years. And one story was about endocrine disruptors, like pesticides, very bad for our health. So I did this investigation 10 years ago. It was 55 minutes. And it's funny because out of 55 minutes, the solution were only 5. So I focused on the problem during 50 minutes. And the day after, viewers, my family, my friends, send me messages telling me, oh my God, your piece was great, but so depressing. What do we do? And it was like a click in my head. I say, yeah, they're right. I only talk about solution 5 minutes out of 55. And I'm not here to depress people, right? It's not that our job. It's not to depress the readers or the viewers. So that was a click for me, a starting point to say, hey, how can I do solutions better? And I finally succeed this year because I did a documentary on how can we eat differently without pesticides, without impacting the planet, Is it possible? And I did a 90 minutes documentary, and that was a country, 90 minutes, only 6 minutes on the problem, and all of it on solutions. And we had almost on Channel 5, 1 million viewers. And people, the day after, send me messages telling us, thank you so much, because you inspired us. So, you see, this is the story that's helped me and you really convert me and encourage me to continue to do solutions journalism.
So you kind of took traditional approach and turned it on its head.
Exactly, with the same, and we're going to talk later, with the same tools. I'm still a journalist, but what I did when I did my investigation, I apply it to solution journalism.
Okay, thank you. Drew, we heard your story. You were actually a fellow. Did you hear before your education, before you were chosen to do a program about it? Did you hear about solution journalism before, constructive journalism, or not? Or was this your first sense of what it really is?
I was aware of it. We already had a constructive circle, what we call constructive circle within Deutsche Welle, before this fellowship has been launched. But also, we have been doing this intuitively because constructive journalism is, at the end of the day, is good journalism. You just don't name it, but once you name it, you are trying to equip yourself with the tools that you can do it more consciously. And it was after that fellowship that I was like, there are stories that I actually commissioned that could be considered constructive, but how can I go beyond that? And how can I evaluate all the pitches, all the story ideas that I receive as an editor, and add a constructive take? And it doesn't have to be 100%. It can be like a 5% of an improvement, 10% of an improvement, because we gradually get there. Can
you remember maybe a specific story that kind of put you in this mindset?
I haven't given that example in the presentation. There was, unfortunately, the big earthquake in Turkey in 2023, in southern Turkey and northern Syria. More than 50,000 people died. And I will use the term, the pornography of terror, in the first few weeks, that everything about coverage was focusing on the people who died, blame game, and also there were so many people still under the rubble because you have a limited time to rescue them if you can reach them, because they're going to die after a certain time. It's like a week maximum. And then every story that you see another person was saved is big news. But in this environment, we were in the room, in the editorial room, how can we go beyond this pornography of terror and then try to learn something from this? And then we decided to compare two important earthquakes that happened in the world, one in Turkey again in 1999, and we decided to compare how we haven't learned from that to what is the experiences like in Japan, because they also had a 1995 Kobe earthquake, which was pretty similar to our 1999 earthquake. Nowadays, we don't hear anybody in Japan dying of earthquakes, but we are still having this problem. And we decided, why don't we compare what were the measures that these two countries have adopted in the aftermath of their earthquakes, and how Turkey did not learn from it, and what it can learn from Japan, so that in the future our policymakers can be more knowledgeable and the society can be more pressing on the policymakers, so that these earthquake resilience methods are implemented. So that was a brilliant idea, that we could manage to get over the doom and gloom situation, and people still appreciate today when, on hindsight, we go back to the comments and they're like, this story should have been done maybe 20 years ago.
Well, before. Assunta, you are also in journalism for a number of years, 10 years or more than 10 years. You are in constructive journalism. Can you maybe share, how did you begin? Maybe share a specific story that you were doing that finally clicked for you, that constructive journalism is the way to go.
Okay, thank you, Philip. Oh, yes, I started 10 years ago. I founded constructive journalism and then solution journalism, looking, around in the digital world because I was very tired about my profession, and I was tired because they were asking me to do journalism in a different way. I mean, that wasn't the way I was thinking about when I was a girl at the university and says, I want to be a journalist. Okay, but which kind of journalist? And so I started from there, and then I found out that it was a good way to work when a psychologist during an interview told me that people comes in therapy and say, please help me. I'm overwhelmed with news and I'm in depression. So I think that that was for me, something on the stomach. And I said, okay, it's not possible that journalists are doing so. I don't want to be that kind of journalist. And so I called 6 of my friends, colleagues, and we founded a constructive network in 2019. And we were 7, now we are 277 in Italy, all around Italy. And we just started to stay together, and don't feel alone on this kind of approach. And now we are doing a lot of things, training and spreading constructive journalism and solution journalism in Italy.
So for you, it was a mix of frustration and also what people say, the direct impact of negative journalism that goes around. Jeske, what about your story? We heard a little bit about your collective, but how did you start? Did you know right away that this was the right way to go with constructive journalism? Or did you do things the traditional way first and then discover this approach later?
No, I'm a bit impressed with the journalistic careers of my colleagues sitting next to me. Now I come I think I come from solutions in the social field. So I was a researcher and a writer in the social field, editor, but I didn't call it journalism. And always looking at what we can do to work on solutions for social challenges. But in that I was kind of lacking the critical perspective that investigative journalists bring into it. And one day I was talking to some of the people from the Momus Collective, a collective of investigative journalists, and they wanted to work more on solutions, and particularly also on the file that I've been working on, the housing file, a lot. So we decided to collaborate. So I think I kind of started with constructive journalism or solution journalism in the investigative field. And in one of the
This was research, sorry to interrupt you, this was research about homelessness, right?
That's the research I'm doing now, yeah. We've also done other researches, but that's the main research I'm doing now.
Okay. The other big topic surrounding constructive journalism is how to, and especially in Croatia, how to transform newsrooms. We see a lot of editors kind of bashing this idea, saying, "Oh, it's too expensive, it's too complicated, it's not going to click," and that's the most important thing. So maybe you have, for us here in Croatia, and we heard about our situation here. Do you have some advices how to change newsrooms in this way? Where to start? Are changes going to come from editors or from journalists itself? Or Sophie, what's your advice? What would you say? Where to begin?
Where to begin? That's a good question. I think you need first to be trained. What is solution journalism and what is not? Because I think solution journalism, and we've been talking about it since this morning, suffers from many stereotypes, and editors don't understand what it means. And once you want to do it, and once you understand it's interesting to do it, how to practice it rigorously. That's why I think we need to be trained. Myself, I didn't start by doing solution journalism like this. I was trained by Solution Journalism Network, which is an organization coming from the US, but like Constructive Institute and Ulrich does, it's you need to learn how to do it. And the transitions, and Minal share with us that she's doing trainings all over Europe. This is something, if you want a newsroom to shift, you need to be trained. I think this is the most important thing to start with.
Okay. Is there, sorry to interrupt you,
Yeah.
is there an example in France that the whole newsroom have turned to this? Because it kind of seems to me that we have like particular journalists who value this approach, who push it forward, but to have like an entire newsroom, except for Plus 90, is kind of a big undertaking.
The thing is, it's not all the newsroom has to do solution journalism only. Of course, we still cover the news, but it's important that among this newsroom, they understand what it is, that maybe, yes, in the news, they can have the idea that, okay, what the solution story we could do this week? Her arriving on Monday on a newsroom, and hey, what will be there? And it's SVT, which is a Sweden TV. I had them in a training 2 weeks ago, and the chief editor told me, yes, we were trained, and after, the way we did it was, okay, we still cover the news, but on Monday morning on the conference room, the discussion is not only on the breaking news, it's what will be on solution angle this week. They force them to really think about that. It's like, I think it's a muscle you activate it in your brain. Once you know what it is, you activate that muscle and you see the news in a new way. And if the chief editor is on board, honestly, it saves time because it means that we can have discussion to really implement that. Not every day, because it's true that there is the news, there is the breaking news, but if you force yourself to think, yes, maybe an SVT, for example, they do it 3 times a week. That's good. You know, that's already something. Sometimes she told me we don't succeed, but sometimes, yeah, we are happy, but sometimes we have more than 3 in a week. So I think it's yes, once you train and activate your muscle, it can work. And the SVT show me it's working.
Okay. Your example is also interesting. You are part of a traditional big media, let's say Deutsche Welle. In Croatia, we also have this kind of approach to media. We have large conglomerates mostly that are kind of quote-unquote mainstream media. So maybe you can tell a bit about your experience being in a traditional media and trying something like that. Were there some pushbacks forcing this idea? How did editors and structures and owners react to it? What were some challenges in the beginning?
I consider myself very lucky and privileged on many levels because first, I don't have any journalists who need to convince me to do more constructive journalism because I'm in a decision-making position. But I think it's a two-way street. One, I agree with Sophie that people need to know what constructive journalism and solutions-oriented stories are. But at the same time, if you train only journalists who have the least say during the editorial making processes, then you cannot make that much of a difference. But I have an advice for them. They should just be guerrilla. I don't face this myself, but I have my other fellows in Deutsche Welle who were working in their respective departments and going fighting an uphill battle to get the story ideas with a constructive take to be approved by their editors. And I remember their frustration that nobody was getting it. What they did, they were just trying to implement small seeds of constructive takes in the story ideas that they were pitching, and then just going back to the editor, hey, where was this constructive angle? 2 weeks later, I want to expand on that. And then 2 weeks later, I want to expand on that. And slowly but surely, they built this up and then convinced their editors and managers that those stories are paying off. This is the guerrilla tactic. And another thing that I feel privileged of is that Deutsche Welle had a top-down transformation mindset already when I got into this. So like from the editor-in-chief all the way down, they initiated this fellowship because they wanted to see the results. And you have to get the managers and the editors on board in order to do this. And not only that, you have to teach the managers and editors how to do constructive journalism too, because it's not only the journalist's duty to be able to convince their superiors, but also you need to implant this understanding of how this works in decision-making roles as well. So that was my experience. You can go from bottom to the top in a guerrilla way, and you also have to educate the people who are in a decision-making position.
So your advice for Croatian journalists is to be disobedient, to be guerrilla?
I mean, it's a part of journalism, isn't it? We're in this business in the first place because we don't like going by the rules.
Yeah, okay, I like that. Yeah, just for the beginning, yeah. Until all the editors and all the journalists are going to be disobedient in the end, yeah. Assunta, what's your experience? How to change it? Did you have some tries at changing the traditional newsrooms, or did your network come out of this frustration that it cannot be done? I'm sorry, that was
it's okay. Well, in the network we are working almost with freelance journalists and individuals journalists. This is the easy way to, to spread constructive journalism in Italy. Because in Italy we have two great challenges. The first one is that editors and sometimes the public, the communities, think that constructive journalism is a positive journalism. So we are still in this challenge. So we are doing a lot of events, to inform, to training, to let people understand that it's not like that. And the other one is that editors think that to be rigorous, they need to be cynic, okay? And so they are not rigorous. and this is a point. And sometimes some colleagues in the network tell me, okay, Assunta, if I make a pitch for a constructive story, then the editor-in-chief says, okay, no, what's that? No. Okay, so my advice is don't tell it, just do it.
Okay, disobedience.
Someone else told us. Just do it, and then maybe you can, explain how did you work, because when this happens, then the editors-in-chief says, okay, this is a good story.
Exactly.
It's going good, yeah. So this is constructive journalism. And then you say that, they say, that's interesting. But anyway, in Italy, it's very hard to work with the newsroom. We have in the network 3 newsrooms that are independent one, and they are working with us. One is on sustainability and climate change. And the other one is taking, all stories about Italy who is changing, communities that are changing in Italy, is Italia che cambia. The other one was Economia Circolare. And then we have Be Hope magazine that is trying to tell stories. So it's more easy for us to have independent newsroom, to have some, case histories. And but with the big newsroom, it's very difficult at the moment.
Maybe I can add, if I totally agree with you, I advise my students who wants to sell some pitches to editors, don't say it's a solution story. Just say it's a good story. This is a story we never done before. Yeah. And you have to be a little tricky. And it's working. Yeah, I can tell you, my students succeed to do that. So
guerrilla and lying.
And after, exactly. And the story works. And after, oh my God. It was a solution story. Yeah, at the end. So I think it's the way to pitch the angle. Yeah. Okay, it's a solution story, but it didn't know really that it was a story.
Okay, thank you. Jeske, maybe you can tell us a bit about your collective, Momus. You have like an interesting way of functioning. I don't think that in Croatia we have anything similar. You don't have editors, right? You are like all journalists, and you decide for yourselves. Is that correct? How does that work, having no boss?
I kind of like it. No, but we still have to work with the big newsrooms if we want to get our stories published, right? So we also still have to deal with that. But I think for our own decision-making process, we work with consent. So we pitch our ideas to each other. We always have others listening in, reading with us. And rather than say yes or no, we ask constructive questions like how could you shape it in a way that we can include this, or what are the objections and how can we address those. So that's something in our decision-making process that we do, and we're also shifting to become a member organization. So actually tomorrow we have a meetup with some of the people who participated in our research, but also some of our readers, followers, to see if we can incorporate them more in our decision-making process, in our research, and if they can become members, and also as a way to finance our stories. So that's a way we try to work with that.
Yeah, that was my next question. How do you finance this? You said you also collaborate with other networks. Yeah. How do you approach them? How do you pitch them your stories? Do you have a lot of suspicion coming from them, the traditional media, or how does it work?
I think something that works for us is that during the research process we already document, so we're very transparent. So we write research notes on findings, and also we give updates on interviews and things we find. So we already have something to show for if we start pitching. And we don't pitch it as solution stories per se, but we, pitch the angle and what we want to approach, and how we can focus on places where things are going well and compare them maybe to other municipalities where things are not going so well. So I think they're quite enthusiastic, and even with, so the main research I've been doing for the last half year is about homelessness. And in that we discovered a lot of more women are homeless than we thought, like about 1/3 of the homeless population is women, is female. And that's because of a solution we researched of a new counting method. Now, that got us a big publication in an investigative journal. And because we got really in-depth with the stories of these women and we built relationships of trust, now we get a big podcast of 4 episodes with the major broadcasting organization in the Netherlands. So I think what works for us is that we keep people updated of the process, and we build upon what we have done so far. So that's also what we do with the constructive journalism and engaging the people we do research with. Yeah.
Okay, but can this type of organization and this type of doing journalism, can it survive on the market? Let's say big questions were, is this approach marketable? Is it profitable? Does it bring enough clicks? Can you survive like on your own, or?
I think we're in the process of finding that out, so stay with us. Yeah. We're trying to do it in a different way, and I think a lot of the people here, I heard, are also freelancers. So it is something you could give a shot, like start a collective and see if you can get funding and work with partners for financial stability and get members to support your solution stories. I'd say give it a try, and look for collaborations abroad as well for inspiration.
Okay, so disobedience once again against the market. How much time do we have? Do we
really have 2 minutes left?
2 minutes.
Are we okay? Do we have one question? Two? Oh, okay. Okay, one question more. For starts, for last. Can you maybe give like an improvised approach on a selected subject? When we talked about it yesterday, you said that maybe a good beginning is, for our creation context, to treat with the constructive journalism approach topics that we do all the time. For example, Black Friday is
good
one,
example,
or Christmas, or Christmas shopping. These are topics that we do every year. We do always the same kind of, we can copy paste it probably like 5 years ago today, and nothing is going to change. Maybe tweak numbers a bit. But what can we do with these topics that can kind of function to change the perspective, to change the angle, and to make it more constructive based?
I have a good example for you guys. In France, a media called Green, Vert, so they're very focused on climate and environment, and they're very successful. And by the way, they were founded by young journalists. So yeah, you can do that too. Create your own media. So Green Le Media, they did for Black Friday an article about jeans, okay, the last firm who produced in France, totally made in France, a jean. Never heard of that story before myself, honestly. It was 1 million people who click on it. 1 million. 1 million. So, okay, it was not the idea to promote this company. Of course, like Minal shared with you earlier, we have to see the limitation of the story. If this is replicable, of course the prices of the jean are a little more expensive, and it told us in the article. But really, it was interesting to see, oh my God, this is something interesting, that, okay, in this mix of a Black Friday thing, there are some people who are doing their job in the right way, because ecologically it's better. It's in France, it's jobs, it's interesting. And yes, it's more expensive, but do we need to buy like 10,000 jeans a year? Not really. So, you know, this kind of article, I think, is inspiring. And they were honestly very surprised that it clicks that much. And it was a solution story. For the week, the entire week, it was the best and the most clickable on the website. So yeah, I think it's interesting to, yeah, I hope encourage you to do more solution stories here.
Okay. Drew, you mentioned in your presentation examples what you did on well-known topics. Can you maybe name one? What's like the thought process behind the stories that we usually do and do it without thinking to kind of change our mindset?
I think a combination of several factors. First is like, who are you serving? Like, what is your audience? Like, what is the message that you want to lay across? Because that is what you want to communicate as a journalist. And it doesn't have to be an overarching perspective, because there are various perspectives. And as a news outlet or as a single channel like ourselves, you can have like one message that you might want to communicate, and establishing and being aware of that message is very important to start with. So the question that we're asking ourselves every time, like, by doing this story, what is the message that we want to communicate with our audience? And then after that, once we agree upon that, what are the means to get there? What are the questions that haven't been asked so far? What are the people that were not approached before? What is the angle that provides a solution that will make a change in people's lives so that they can reclaim agency? Those are the thought processes that we evaluate all the stories. And then once we settle on an idea with a consensus, then we communicate that with the reporter and say, we want the story, but oftentimes it's like this: we want the story that you pitched to us, but not in the way that you want to do. Are you still interested?
Okay, Sudha, what do you think? What's the right angle to take? Let's say on Christmas shopping. Do you have?
Oh, I have a topic. Okay. Well, maybe the first step is doing different questions to yourself at the beginning when you approach the story, and maybe asking what is missing in the, in the narrative, in the storytelling about that topic, in Christmas days also, and who is doing something different and how is doing that. So maybe the point before to go into the solution, we need to make some different questions. Yes, working on the topic.
Jeske, you said you did a research on homelessness. We know when the winter comes, there is usually a lot of topics concerning this phenomenon, but we mostly focus on sob stories, kind of going overboard with a pathetic narrative. Do you know if there is an angle, a constructive-based angle, that can serve to do this topic rightly?
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. Like, the people I interview in this research are some of the strongest and most compassionate people I've ever met. Most of the homeless people we talk to, especially the homeless women, they are very involved, for example, in local politics or helping others. And the reason for them to share their stories is because they actually want to contribute to social change. So the last thing we want to do is to make them look like sad victims, right? So we focus on their agency. That's something I also really like about you, just stressing that a lot, about the initiatives they set up, but also just present them as very layered persons, like make them relatable. And since we've been doing that, we've been getting also responses from people we work with professionally, like experts we interview that share like, actually, I have a personal story relating this issue, or someone very close to me. So that's how we help with breaking the stereotypes. And it can start really small. Like, I never talk about the homeless. We always talk about homeless people, and we also write a research note showing transparency why we make this editorial decision. And the challenge for us then is that external editors sometimes change my words. And then
that can happen.
That happens, yeah. But then we have like the research notes to show like what decisions we make. So yeah, like show their agency and look for the relatability rather than the difference, I'd say.
Okay, Charuka, I don't know if you have a plane to catch. Are you watching time? Okay, maybe if you have 5 more minutes, I don't know if anyone from the audience has any questions. You can ask now.
No questions?
No questions?
I believe that. You journalists,
we stay around if you have questions later.
Yeah, maybe
always have questions.
Maybe in an informal setting now.
Yeah. And I'll be there today for a workshop, so maybe on solution journalism, so maybe
they will have more questions.
More questions, I'm sure.
Yeah. Okay, thank you guys very much.
Thank you. Thank you to you.
Thank you guys for listening.
And we stay here.
Thank you so much for everything. Thanks a lot. Now we have to switch quickly for another panel. Sad ćemo malo vidjeti kako to zvuči na našem terenu. Napokon je došao taj trenutak da vidimo kako ćemo mi konstruktivno novinarstvo i vijesti primijeniti u Hrvatskoj. Pozivam sudionike i sudionice i sudionike ovog našeg zadnjeg, ali ne manje važnijeg panela da mi se pridruže. Nikakvu pauzu nećemo raditi s obzirom da smo malo izgubili vrijeme. A do tad, dok vi zauzimate svoja mjesta, ja ću zamoliti samo da poslušamo studentice i studente novinarstva kakva su njihova očekivanja, kakvo bi novinarstvo oni voljeli, željeli, kakvo sanjaju.
Novinarstvo je javno dobro. Kreativa.
Stil života.
Izazovno.
Ja mislim da bi novinarstvo danas moglo biti puno bolje.
Refleks u laži.
AI. Velika komercijaliziranost.
Pristranost.
Lažne vijesti.
Clickbait naslovi.
Izazovi profesije su izbjeći senzacionalizam.
Naživcira me panika nepotrebna.
Velika kritika novinarstvu je premala dubina same tema.
Ljudi na webu to gledaju samo kroz klikove, kvaliteta samih članaka, novinarskih priloga pada u drugi plan.
Ja mislim da mladi nemaju povjerenja u medije zato što se nudi jako puno sadržaja na društvenim mrežama i onda oni ne mogu razlikovati koji je sadržaj dobar i točan, a koji nije.
Ja sam upisala novinarstvo zato što sam htjela pomoći nekako u destigmatizaciji novinarstva. Ljudi koji nisu toliko u ovoj sferi misle da novinari samo lažu.
Kad sam rekla nekome da ću upisati novinarstvo, dobila sam reakciju. Super.
Novinarstvo se svelo na te kratkotrajne formate kojima je cilj samo što prije zadovoljiti svakog gledatelja, čitatelja. Malo tko više gleda taj jedan konstruktivni tip novinarstva kroz koji se može zapravo nešto i naučiti i učiniti jedan korak naprijed.
Mislim da ima puno načina kako bi se vijesti mogle bolje plasirati građanima, od samog načina pisanja i izvještavanja pa sve do, kao što sam već rekao, njihove edukacije, a nekako to mi se najbolje komponira u sferi konstruktivnog novinarstva.
Da se nude neka rješenja u kontekstu društvenih problema.
Uključuje i ljude u tom cijelom procesu. Znači nije samo da novinar iznosi tu temu, nego zajedno sa nekim akterima neke priče pokušava doći do tog nekog rješenja.
Konstruktivno novinarstvo gradi društvo, ne razdvaja ga. Pokušava na neki način biti pozitivno, a ne samo negativno.
Da novinarstvo bude polje koje nudi odgovore i koje ljudima nudi nekako utjehu da će stvari biti bolje na konkretne načine.
Opet ti to iziskuje puno više vremena da ti shvatiš, da ti uopće uđeš u tu priču. Kao ne možeš ti shvatiti priču ako si ju, ne znam, radio 2 sata.
Mislim da kod nas budućnost kvalitetnog novinarstva ima, no da je jako teško doći do nje, jer mislim da novinarstvo tu najmanje utječe na, ajmo reći, plasiranje takvog sadržaja, već tu drugi jedni aspekti od politike pa sve do samog nekog življenja u društvu i samog društva, tako da ima, ali vrlo teško.
Konstruktivno novinarstvo može zaživjeti, ali tu se mi kao medijski djelatnici moramo na neki način prilagoditi našoj publici ipak. Znamo što publika želi, znamo što publika traži, samo trebamo napraviti hibrid onoga što već radimo i idealnog konstruktivnog novinarstva.
Ja znam jako puno mladih novinara, mislim da je budućnost hrvatskog novinarstva ok.
Budućnost struke je pod upitnikom, ne znam.
Mi se kao mladi moramo boriti protiv te stvarnosti i protiv tog novinarstva koji se nama nameće. Mislim da je to jako teško, ali mislim da je to moguće. Kao ako zajedno kažemo, to nećemo raditi, hoćemo drugačije novinarstvo.
Vidim li se u struci za 10 godina? Teško mi je reći zato jer već sada u ovoj dobi, mladoj dobi, već na samom početku moje novinarske karijere dosta me stvari brine, stvari zbog kojih se danas propitkujem jesam li trebao upisati ovu profesiju, ali opet kažem s druge strane pružam jednu priliku da vidim jedan prostor na kojem se može doći do napretka. Ako me već sada brinu te stvari, možda će to biti, možda će doći do prevelikog zasićenja za 10 godina, tako da ne mogu reći baš da ću ostati u ovoj profesiji.
Malo mikrofon. Čujemo se? Čujemo se, bravo. Znači, kolega je mladi završio sa idejom da nije baš siguran zašto je upisao novinarstvo. Odmah spoiler jedan i mi svi ostali nismo baš sigurni je li to bila najpametnija odluka u našem životu, ali dobro, sad što je tu je, moramo raspravljati o tome što dalje. Evo, upravo tako se naziva ovaj naš panel Što dalje. Imamo stvarno sjajne sugovornike s nama, su Ksenija Kardum, glavna urednica informativnog programa Nove TV, Ivan Zrinski, urednik digitalnog izdanja Jutarnjeg lista, profesorica za koju ne smijem reći da je profesorica, nego novinarka i urednica Tena Perišin, Rahela Štefanović, glavna urednica televizijskih kanala HRT-a, neću ih sve nabrajati, i naša kolegica Dora Kršul, novinarka Telegrama, istraživačka. Kao što vidimo, istraživačko novinarstvo stiže zadnji čas, znači ozbiljno se radi. Dobro. Počet ćemo naravno malo s ovom sumornijim dijelom priče, a to je kakva nam je situacija danas. Svašta smo već čuli današnjem danu, bilo je jako inspirativno, ali prvo malo moramo definirati probleme kako ih mi vidimo. Ksenija, evo iz pozicije koju obnašaš, možemo biti ovako malo na ti, ne moramo se, da, možemo. Kako ti zapravo gledaš na stanje novinarstva u Hrvatskoj? Koji su najveći problemi s kojima je suočena komercijalna televizija? Što je to? Jesu li to ne toliko inspirirani više novinari? Ima li uopće dovoljno novinara? Je li problem toga da se mora razmišljati i o oglašivačima, o programu, na koji način će funkcionirati? Što su najveći izazovi?
Dobar dan svima. Još jednom, pa ovako, ja ne bi najprije krenula od problema komercijalne televizije, krenula bi generalno. Mi ovdje cijeli dan slušamo u stvari i pričamo o konstruktivnom novinarstvu, a čini mi se da mi u Hrvatskoj moramo se najprije dogovoriti što novinarstvo jest. Rekla bi da su zadnjih više od desetljeća sigurno da se svašta podvodi pod novinarstvo, i aktivizam i raznih oblika, i rječnik koji je potpuno neprimjeren i kojem nije mjesto u medijima.
I mislim da je to jedan dobar dio razloga zašto je, dakle, ne samo negativne vijesti kao takve, nego općenito i način na koji se radi, velik dio razloga zašto ljudi gube povjerenje i zašto smo mi, kao što smo vidjeli na jednom od onih slajdova, treća, čini mi se, zemlja po...
Druga, 61% samo ljudi, da.
Druga zemlja po gubitku povjerenja. Sad, to je jedan ogroman problem. Često pričamo o tome zašto smo tako negativni. Sad ću se vratiti na nas kao komercijalnu televiziju. Mi se trudimo ne biti tako negativni. Ja se s idejom konstruktivnog novinarstva nisam susrela danas prvi put. Negdje kratko nakon što je osnovan taj institut, našli smo ga na internetu pa smo tako o tome počeli razgovarati u redakciji. I svako toliko, ne mogu reći svaki dan, jer zaista nije svaki dan, ali svako toliko pokušavamo raditi priče na tom tragu. Čak i onda možda kad nismo svjesni da su neke konstruktivne, da spadaju u to što je konstruktivno novinarstvo, one se zapravo pokažu takvima. Dakle, ako smo doveli do neke promjene, to zapravo isto jest to. Sad, koji su problemi i zašto se to ne radi više? Ja bih rekla da se sve redakcije, pa tako i naša, bori sa malim brojem ljudi. Sve manje ljudi se želi baviti novinarstvom. Evo, ovdje možda će Tena nam kasnije nešto moći reći iz perspektive profesorice koja predaje na tom studiju, ali i moje iskustvo je kad dođem na fakultete razgovarati sa studentima, njih, ako su i upisali studij novinarstva, se zapravo u manjem broju žele time zaista baviti. Vi da biste si mogli priuštiti, ja tu ne govorim samo o financijama, nego govorim i o tome da imate vremena, da možete odvojiti nekoga da samo radi neku priču koja možda nije dnevni news, nego podrazumijeva neko dublje istraživanje, da bude upoznat s temom. Morate imati dovoljno ljudi. Dakle, da pokrijete one basic stvari koje trebate imati svaki dan. Naš dnevnik traje skoro sat i pol. Znači, u sat i pol mi moramo snimiti masu toga i da, ne može sve ponuditi neko rješenje. Sad znam da vam ovo zvuči kao izgovor, ali to je realnost. Ne samo naše redakcije, nego rekla bi svih redakcija.
Moraju li ti dnevnici trajati sat i pol?
Pa evo, očito se gledaju pa traju.
Dobro. Ivane, kakva je situacija, evo kad govorimo i o pisanom novinarstvu i o digitalnim medijima, znamo da su sad tu, evo slušali smo i danas clickbaitovi, ono što određuje način, kako se i radi, pa kakva je situacija kod vas, jel vidite ove iste probleme o kojima smo slušali danas cijeli dan?
Pa svakako, mi svi lovimo publiku, jel? Na neki način. Sad kolega Pavičić je jednom napisao, Jurica, jel, da su do nekog trenutka mediji bili taj filter između događaja i publike. Ono što se dogodilo u zadnjih 15 godina sa razvojem društvenih mreža i smartfona i svega, da mi taj filter više samom prirodom svog postojanja nismo. Vi imate društvene mreže, imate TikTok, Twitter, sve ostalo, znači nema potrebe da informacije dobivate iz medija. Možete ih dobiti iz drugih kanala i očito sva ova mlađa publika ih dobiva iz drugih kanala, ne više iz tradicionalnih medija. Međutim, to ne znači da su mediji izgubili po meni tu funkciju tog filtera. Oni su je zadržali, međutim ovaj put se za nju moramo izboriti svojim sadržajem. Ne samo time što postojimo. Znači vi morate kao pisani mediji po meni pokazati kroz kvalitetno novinarstvo, kroz kvalitetne priče, kroz analize, kroz komentare, kroz pokazivanje stava između ostalog zašto ste važni. Vi ste tu, po meni pisani mediji su sad tu da daju kontekst događaja oko nas. Između ostalog isto i da daju i dalje točnu i provjerenu informaciju, jer smo vidjeli da što vrijeme prolazi, to je zapravo ta moneta točne i precizne informacije je sve vrednija i vrednija u količini dezinformacija koje dolazi oko nas. Dovoljno, evo sad ću spomenuti primjer koji vjerujem da ste svi sad pročitali danas u medijima, to je izbodene, to jest neizbodene časne sestre, oko kojega je trebalo biti vrlo oprezno pristupiti i vidjeti što se događa. Ne nužno vjerovati onome što je netko objavio na društvenim mrežama zato jer je vidio ili čuo od nekog nešto, nego pričekati da vidimo što je se doista dogodilo. Znači, to su dvije funkcije po meni koje pisani mediji i tradicionalni mediji dalje trebaju zadržati. točne informacije davati i potom kontekst i komentar tih informacija. Treći aspekt svega toga je, pogotovo kad se analizira neki događaj, je da se koriste stručni sugovornici. Općenito da se sugovornici traže. Neko je spomenuo malo prije, mislim da na početku čak na prvom govoru smo imali pitanje što raditi u doba umjetne inteligencije. Što vas razlikuje od AI-a? AI sad napiše za 2-3 minute, to jest LLM, da budemo precizni, znači napiše bolji tekst nego je većina ljudi u stanju. Da se ne lažemo oko nekoj temi. Ono što vas razlikuje je to da vi odete na teren, da vi nazovete nekoga, da pitate nekoga. To je nešto što stroj još uvijek ne može napraviti. Po meni, ako ste te 3 stvari zadovoljili, i mogu reći da se one vide i po našoj metrici, i po publici, i po čitanju, vi dalje možete zadržati relevantnost neku u društvu i ići prema naprijed. Dakle, točnost, kontekst i stručni sugovornici.
Te s pozicija onoga ko je radio u novinarstvu, a sad obrazuje mlade generacije, buduće novinare i prati naravno medije. Po tebi, evo, koji su najveći problemi, što je ono što danas mi se ne možemo nikako riješiti, gdje je naš specifičan problem hrvatski kada govorimo o hrvatskim medijima?
Samo da krenem od nečeg što smo malo prije ovako za kavom razgovarali. Ja sam danas tužnija nego što sam bila ranije. Ja sam radila na HTV-u, radili smo emisije Paralele, Euromagazin.
Bavili se konstruktivnim.
Donosili primjere. Naši bivši novinari, neki od njih su tu, radili su s užitkom su radili te priče koje su trajali 4, 5, 6, 7 minuta. Svaka od njih je mogla biti uvrštena i u dnevnik. I sjećam se kad govorimo o tom konceptu konstruktivnog novinarstva, smatram da je to samo povratak korijenima. A tu knjižicu, zelenu, prvo izdanje Hagorupove knjige, još sam radila na HTV-u, sa veselje sam je donijela u redakciju. Počela sam to na kolegiju, na faksu isto predavati. Nekoliko diplomskih je bilo i danas gdje smo sad, ja jučer sjedim na promociji knjige o konstruktivnom novinarstvu i dok sjedim, moj prijatelj i kolega i novinar šalje mi najavu za Otvoreno i kaže: je li prosvjed bio najveća provokacija Domovinskog rata? Je li se žalovalo za bivšom državom? Jesu li podjele u društvu na vrhuncu? I give me the break. Šta da sad kažem? Možemo razgovarati o tome, možemo, govorio je danas i Hagerup, kako švedska televizija, norveška televizija, danska televizija, oni imaju talk showove i informativne ovakve govorne emisije ili razgovorne, gdje je također prisutan konstruktivni dijalog, u kojem postoji debata, u kojem se, kao što smo isto o treninzima govorili, u kojem se voditelji treniraju kako da vode taj razgovor, u kojem je nema šanse da sad skupe ljude kojima je jedini cilj da iskopaju jedan drugom oči.
Dobro, sad mogli bi tako tražiti, kopati po svim medijima. Rahela, znamo kako je. Hrvatska radiotelevizija je uvijek vreća za udaranje, ali s pravom, naravno, gledatelji imaju od nas velika očekivanja, pa onda to... Tako, moramo to podnijeti, nema nam druge. Znači, ajmo sad reći kao HRT, koja je to neka ideja, vizija, razmišljanje, promišljanje vlastite uloge? Pogledamo li se mi u ogledalo, kao što je Ulrik danas rekao? Pogledamo li se mi što vidimo i gdje vidimo da bismo stvarno trebali, morali i mogli biti bolji i što nas u tome priječi?
Ja znam da je najlakše i najvažnije moći reći javnom servisu što valja i što ne valja. I mi jesmo tu zapravo za neki i trebali bismo biti za neki balans u društvu i trebali bismo svakodnevno čitati kritike publike, jer tu jesmo zbog publike koja plaća pretplatu i mislim da im moramo to vratiti kroz svoj program. To je prva stvar. Druga stvar, tu se jako puno danas pojavljivala riječ aktivizam. I ja bih htjela reći, kao što u vlastitom životu i privatnom ne volim destrukciju nego volim konstrukciju, tako isto ne volim aktivizam niti jedne vrste i kao glavna urednica sigurno ne podupirem takvu vrstu ni novinarstva, ni izričaja u dramskom programu, dokumentarnom programu ili iti jednom drugom programu. Tako da hvala na kritici Tena, prenijeću je svakako i mislim da o tome trebamo razgovarati. HRT je još uvijek medij koji je najveći proizvođač kulture u Hrvatskoj. Mi nismo samo informativni program. Ja kao glavna urednica imam još 10 odjela koji isto tako zbog pretplate koju ljudi plaćaju proizvode program koji je jednako tako važan. Ja mislim da je danas jako važno da govorimo o tom konstruktivnom, odnosno integraciji konstruktivnog novinarstva i u druge žanrove i ja mislim da smo mi na početku vrlo uspješne prakse u tom segmentu sa serijama kao što je Sram, koja je upravo nastala i u Norveškoj kada je nastajala kao jedno pozitivno i konstruktivno rješenje za mlade generacije u Norveškoj, a tako i u Hrvatskoj. I mislim da je važno da i o tom segmentu govorimo. Da je važno da govorimo i o dokumentarnim serijalima i filmovima u koje pokušavamo integrirati upravo konstruktivno novinarstvo. Jer ja jesam novinarka, završila sam novinarstvo, ali i nekako pokušavam primijeniti sve te alate koje mi je donijelo novinarstvo i znatiželju i objektivnost i sve ostalo u sve što radim, pa tako i u ostale žanrove. I mislim da je i o tome važno govoriti.
Apsolutno, Sram je sigurno dobar primjer s čim se HRT ponosi, samo što smo i tu sad uzeli norvešku licencu, a hoćemo li napraviti...
Ja bih voljela da je to hrvatska pamet.
Tako je,
ja bih jako voljela da je to nastalo u Hrvatskoj i mi smo otvoreni za razgovore i s neovisnim producentima, a pogotovo s ljudima u kući u kojima pokušavamo, evo tu je kolegica Daniela Draštata koja je urednica Prvog i Drugog kanala i koja je dio mog tima i mi stvarno pokušavamo ljudima nekako osvijestiti koliko je važno raditi na takav način i koliko je važno nuditi i osmišljavati formate koji u sebi sadrže takve stvari, koji sadrže jednu esenciju osvještavanja što je to potreba publike za koju radimo, jer je to jako važno, kojim ćemo pristupom tu potrebu negdje nametnuti i osvijestiti i što naša konkurencija radi u tom trenutku i zbog čega će netko zbog nečega što mi napravimo biti kasnije puno bolji u životu, odnosno bit ćemo bolji. Kako ćemo pozitivno utjecati na društvo. To je jedna formula koju pokušavamo zajedno in-house i u neovisnoj produkciji.
Dora, čuli smo sad malo više ovakove uredničke pozicije i poglede. Kako je s pozicije istraživačke novinarke? Što biste vi rekli, koja je vam najveći nekakav izazov profesije s kojom se bavite? Što je najteže, što je ono najveći kamen spoticanja?
Samo jedna kratka digresija na Rahelino izlaganje. Mislim, uz dužno poštovanje Sramu, čiji sam fan i koji je sjajan i koji na super način progovara o mladima danas, mislim, Sram nije novinarstvo. Tako da ja bih voljela od Hrvatske radiotelevizije koju pratim, jer vjerujem u ideju javnog servisa, vidjeti da na konstruktivan način izvještava o mladima i o politikama za mlade, ali Sram kao takav nije novinarstvo. Da je konstruktivan i da je super, apsolutno je. Što se tiče istraživačkog novinarstva, ja imam sreću da radim u redakciji u kojoj radim i svjesna sam da ovdje je i moj prijatelj i kolega Denis Mahmutović, svjesna sam da poziciju u kojoj nas dvoje jesmo u Telegramu, dosta naših kolega u Hrvatskoj diljem nekih drugih redakcija nema. Mi zaista možemo svoje priče raditi slobodno, međutim znamo da što iz osobnih kontakata, što iz onoga što je naravno i dospjelo do javnog prostora, da na puno mjesta to zapravo nije tako. Znamo da se istraživačke emisije ili teme guraju u nekakve termine koji su samo za ono teške entuzijaste ili ljude koji imaju problema sa spavanjem. To je što se toga tiče. Naravno da možemo govoriti o utjecaju politike, oglašivača i x drugih faktora na naš posao, odnosno na konkretno nekakvo istraživanje tema dubinsko i tako dalje. Ono što je meni osobno u nekoj mojoj svakodnevici problem je nedostatak vremena, jer ja sam zaista u svom poslu vrlo detaljna i trudim se biti jako pedantna, ali u nekom času treba podvući crtu i onda nešto i napisati i reći što se dogodilo, ali opet kažem, ja imam sreću da radim u redakciji u kojoj radim, pa sam tako imala primjerice luksuz jednu temu istraživati punih 7 mjeseci. Tako da to je nešto što redakcija prepoznaje kao važno, kao bitno. I evo, meni je žao, kažem, što znam iz razgovora sa zaista brojnim kolegama da na puno mjesta u Hrvatskoj nije takav slučaj, što se istraživačkog novinarstva tiče.
Rahela, slobodno.
Sad je Dora rekla 7 mjeseci istraživala priču. Mi smo za sram 8 mjeseci istraživali našu publiku na način da smo provodili upravo novinarske intervjue. I sva sreća da smo mi u ekipi novinari i urednici koji smo znali napraviti te intervjue da bismo osvijestili i sebi prikazali kako izgleda publika u Hrvatskoj danas, da bismo znali za nju napraviti seriju. Da, složit ću se, sram i dramska serija i nije čisto novinarstvo, ali alate i skillove koje jedan novinar ima može se itekako primijeniti. Samo to.
Da, ali ipak krenimo sad malo o novinarstvu, malo više i tim nekim drugim pristupima. Ksenija, koliko je ovo što je Dora možda rekla, mislim, za istraživačko novinarstvo stvarno potreban ozbiljan rad, evo ponekad i mjeseci, koliko tržište diktira nama svima zapravo tempo kojim radimo, možemo li si više priuštiti taj luksuz, kako ga uopće dobiti, kako si priuštiti luksuz, mogli smo i danas čuti te dobre ideje i primjere, otiđite negdje u Norvešku, pogledajte kako je to tamo, da, znamo mi svi da je to dobro rješenje, međutim nije baš jednostavno financijski ni poslati ekipu svaki put u Norvešku da napravi izvještaj i donese neku priču od tamo.
Pa nije, da, i mislim da je tu možda, da su nacionalne televizije možda još uvijek zapravo da jesu u nekom najboljem položaju. Najprije ću o istraživačkom novinarstvu. Ako imate emisiju koja se bavi istraživačkim novinarstvom i ako imate priču koja je važna, onda apsolutno trebate biti spremni na to da izdvojite neko vrijeme. Mi smo prošli tjedan objavili jednu priču koju je kolegica radila 3,5 mjeseca, zato što smo samo jedan odgovor čekali mjesec dana, recimo. Tako da to se može. A što se tiče termina, termini u kojima emisije idu određeni su nekim, nekad financijskim, nekad nekim drugim parametrima, ali zato uvijek postoji reprize i drugi termini koji možda nisu u nekom kasnovečernjem terminu, ako je kolegica aludirala na to. Ja mislim da samom činjenicom da nešto imate na programu i da ste spremni za to izdvojiti ozbiljan novac, a da višemjesečno istraživanje nečega jest i ozbiljan novac, to znači da vam je to i važno i da do toga držite. Skupo je otići nekamo, mi to ponekad radimo, radili smo i u Dnevniku, evo danas ti neki primjeri koji su se ovdje protezali kroz konferenciju, mi smo ih radili, na primjer, svojedobno kad smo se bavili reformom obrazovanja u Hrvatskoj, onda smo otišla je naša reporterka iz Dnevnika u Finsku i provela je tamo nekih 10-ak dana, radila je priče o tome kako su Finci organizirali svoje obrazovanje. Onda kad smo htjeli pokazati kako bio neki problem sa vrtićima u Hrvatskoj, pa smo snimali danske vrtiće. To ne možete raditi uvijek i zaista jučer na promociji knjige je rečeno kao ne morate ići u neke druge zemlje i ne morate. Evo vam primjer kad je bio problem sa razdvajanjem otpada u Zagrebu, pa u Hrvatskoj postoje lokalne sredine u koje su vrlo uspješno riješile odvajanje otpada. Znači nije trebalo ići na drugi kraj svijeta, mogli smo stvarno samo otići u neku susjednu županiju. Ja mislim da to nije, problemi su i financijski i organizacijski, kao što sam spomenula na početku, ali osnovni problem vezan uz novinarstvo i zašto ono nije konstruktivnije u Hrvatskoj i ja mislim u našim glavama. Dakle, kad se promijeni mentalni sklop, kad možda svi dobiju malo više i hrabrosti da neke stvari počnu raditi drugačije, kad se malo i othrvate tome da ste pod napadom zato što nešto niste. Kolega je spomenuo priču o Časnoj. Mi nismo radili priloge o tome, objavili smo vijest i pretrpili smo podosta napada u komentarima. Zašto to skrivate, zašto ovo, zašto ono. Sad tu se vraćamo na ono što sam prvo spomenula. Najprije mi moramo razlučiti što je uopće novinarstvo. Po meni je novinarstvo da ne objavljuješ nešto što je neprovjereno i ne znaš uopće koji je izvor te vijesti. Tako da, evo, ne mora biti skupo, može za početak biti samo ono promjena mentalnog sklopa.
Pa sad, Ivane, imamo li mi uopće šanse, ideje, vizije, strategije, plana, mogućnosti promijeniti taj naš mentalni sklop? Mislim, je li iluzorno ako kažem sad, ako krene svatko od nas i ako svatko od nas kao pojedinac napravi neku promjenu, pa možda ćemo zakotrljati taj kamen da krene u nekom drugom smjeru?
Prostite, ali ja moram pitati šta to znači promijeniti mentalni sklop? Mi ovdje, sve što smo do sad govorili, kao ispada da naša publika kao mora se promijeniti, mora biti na drugačiji način. Ja mislim da ne. Recimo, sva ova istraživanja koja smo vidjeli, koja se pokazala na 107.000 ljudi koji su rekli zasićeni smo vijestima, želimo nešto drugo, nije nam više tako. Ok, i ankete koje smo mi radili isto svojedobno na portalu su pokazivale ne želimo ovo, želimo ono drugo. Međutim, onda vi date taj drugi sadržaj, onda vi pogledate svoju metriku i vidite da to ne korelira nužno. Znači, moja poanta je da vi i dalje morate imati sve vijesti. Vi pratite ono što se događa. Vi pratite svijet oko vas. Vi ste tu prvo da zabilježite događaj, da mu date kontekst. A ako postoji solucija za rješenje za koju vi imate vremena i resursa da ju ponudite i date, da pače. To je super ako se može. Nisam uvjeren da je to uvijek moguće. Nisam uvjeren i da to mi uvijek nužno moramo i servirati da je to neka naša dužnost. Naša je dužnost prvenstveno da tu budemo točni. Uostalom, mi smo, a sad isto da se ne varamo kao i svi ostali, na tržištu. Mi gledamo ono što publika voli čitati, kako čitati, što preferira. To ne znači da ćete neke stvari ignorirati. Ali recimo, evo primjera radi, čitao sam ovu knjigu. Knjiga kao primjer navodi Afriku, mislim da je krajem 2010-ih gdje je isticala kao samo se ističu negativne vijesti, ne pokazuje se napredak koliko je ljudi izašlo iz siromaštva i tako dalje. A onda pogledate recimo tu isto tu područje koje se spominje u knjizi danas, Afriku, 17 državnih udara dalje, ne znam, 2 velika rata u kojima pogine nekoliko stotina tisuća ljudi i ostalo, i vi se pitate, ok, a što ako je vijest negativna? Ne mogu frejmat drugačije nego takva kakva jest. Tako da nisam ja baš siguran to koliko se tu treba mijenjati mentalni sklop iskreno ljudi. Mislim da se treba samo pošteno pristupiti poslu i odraditi ga objektivno i korektno.
Ksenija?
Nisam ja pod promjenom mentalnog sklopa mislila da ne moramo imati sve vijesti, ali mislim da je zabluda, najprije da ljudi ne vole pozitivne vijesti. Iz našeg iskustva to se pokazalo potpuno netočnim. Znači, evo konkretno u Provjerenom, od 4 priče svaki tjedan, jedna nam je obavezno neka pozitivna, inspirativna, ljudi koji su nešto promijenili i napravili drugačije, ta uredno prolazi najbolje. Dakle, najbolje od svih. Sad, i u tome kako radimo, znači ja to duboko vjerujem, pokušavamo, nekad uspijemo, nekad ne uspijemo, mislim, jednostavno je tako. Ali ja kao čitatelj, recimo, sam se počela bojati svake promjene vremena u Hrvatskoj. Apsolutno svake. Ja ujutro kad upalim portale i kad pročitam da dolazi nešto, ja mislim danas smo gotovi, Sašić će nas ista oluja kao ona prije 3 godine, razbit će mi prozor. Evo, dakle, ali to nije normalno. I onda počnem shvaćati šta mi radimo našoj publici. Dakle, ako sam ja postala paranoična oko toga hoće li past kiša, oko pojava koje su prije, ne znam, 10 godina bile sasvim normalne. Ono, pašće kiša, uzmi kišobran i odi van. Na to sam mislila. Dakle, moramo malo ipak dovesti stvari u normalu i početi se prema njima ponašati kao realno. Evo.
Može, Teno, rasprava je, nema polako, evo sad replika, pa slijediš. Sad će, evo,
Vrlo
stiže.
kratak. Ako smijem, potpuno se slažem. Odgovornost medija i novinara tu recimo da baš te obične vijesti tipa vremenske prognoze i ostalo nastojimo premati na normalan način je to se stvarno mora promijeniti. To su bezvezarije. Evo, reći ću iskreno i kod nas ili kod bilo koga drugoga, raditi dramu od obične vremenske prognoze doista nema nikakvog smisla. Još samo što se tiče pozitivnih priča, nisam rekao da one ne prolaze. Rekao sam da treba raditi sve i kod nas isto u Jutarnjem neke dobre priče, pogotovo one sa, što kažemo, živom riječi, sugovornicima, vrlo često znaju super proći.
Da, evo, Teno, prije evo komentara, ja nisam baš sigurna te mantre koja se vrlo često u našoj profesiji ponavlja i to vole urednici govoriti, ali publika to traži. Mislim, traži li publika to zato što je mi to nudimo? Mislim, možda da mi malo promijenimo naš sklop i počnemo nuditi malo drugčije sadržaje. Mislim, ne bi se složila, radim nešto drugo i ja iz svoje perspektive mogu reći da, publika to traži. Mislim,
ja isto mislim, a to je i Markas zadnji put rekao, sad u ovom prethodnom isto, kao to publika traži, te priče ne prolaze, ili sam te krivo shvatila. Ali ja isto mislim da to nije točno, ja se ne sjećam kad sam vidjela tak jednu dobru priču na Večernjem portalu, ajde morat ćeš mi malo, ali ja sam sigurna da je bila dobra priča da bi se dijelila i da bi je pamtili, kao što isto tako znamo neke televizijske priče koje pamtimo, koje su bile inspirativne, dobre. Ali ovdje mislim isto kod kolege da nije baš shvatio. Nije sad to mijenjanje mentalnog sklopa i to uopće ne znači da sad mi trebamo skrivati negativne vijesti. Problem je ono što sam probala prije reći. Problem je u tome što se kao i sa vremenom, tako i sa bilo čemu, koncertom, provociraju konflikti. Provocira se upravo to cijelo vrijeme, kao da je to agenda medija. Da se stvori konflikt i da, šta znam, ono što sam malo prije rekla, da se sad tu međusobno zavadimo.
Nećemo se zavaditi, konstruktivno razgovaramo.
Ali ja sam fina, inače bi upotrebila druge riječi. Ali sad tu kad sam već, gdje su mi drage kolegice, evo moja jedna od najdražih mi je tu Daniela, ali ja sam dijete te televizije. Dakle, ja sam više godina provela na HTV-u nego, oprostite mi, na fakultetu. Ali sasvim se, o čemu mi pričamo? Vi morate svijestiti, vi ste javna televizija. Dakle, ako bi javna televizija promijenila diskurs, onda bi tu stvari se počele mijenjati. A ne da i sad mi govorimo o sramu, to je jako lijepo. Ja isto gledam neke divne stvari na HTV-u, najbolje dokumentarce, najbolje serije. To uopće nije sporno. Imate super program. Međutim, publika, evo pitajte ove studente moje tamo, publika percipira HTV kroz informativni program. A to je dno dna. Ok, hvala.
Rahela, sretno.
Evo ga ima.
Jako vam nedostaje HRT, to sam shvatila. Možete nam doći malo ponekad.
Da, ali sad, ozbiljno sad, moramo to postaviti kao pitanje. Može li javna televizija stvarno preuzeti na sebe tu ulogu? Da kažemo, mi smo ti koji ćemo pokrenuti promjenu. Mislim, stalno upiremo prstom u nekog drugog i očekujemo da netko drugi napravi nešto. Možemo li mi u našu nekakvu strategiju, planove nešto učiniti i reći, evo, mi ćemo biti ti koji ćemo pokrenuti stvari, pa i u tom nesretnom informativnom programu.
Promjena, mislim, javni servisi Europe su definitivno predvodnici, ne samo promjena u programu, nego i u tehnologiji i u svemu drugome. To se od nas očekuje. Spominjala se ovdje promjena mindseta, razmišljanja. Jako je veliki problem mindseta i u našoj kući na HRT-u. Problem je, većina nas nije dovoljno educirana za posao koji radi. Mediji koji se mijenjaju svakodnevno. Mi koji zapravo vučemo neke stare ideje ili uopće nismo možda na izvoru novih informacija vezanih za medije, novih načina novinarstva, novog konstruktivnog novinarstva. To je definitivno nešto što moramo raditi i definitivno je edukacija nešto što nedostaje na HRT-u i što ne radimo sustavno i što bismo trebali raditi sustavno. I to je definitivno dio strategije koji, kako bi rekla, mora postati svakodnevan i ljudi se unutar informativnog programa, ali i svakog drugog programa moraju definitivno educirati više nego što se educiraju. I evo, ja mogu naravno tu obećati da ću ja sve što je u svojoj moći napraviti da mi postanemo predvodnici tih nekih promjena, ali silnice nekad odvedu negdje drugdje.
Ja sad samo odgovoriti.
Može.
I osim toga gledam novinari kod nas doma. Dobro, vi ste zabavni program, tu ima svijetlih primjera, ali hoću reći što se tiče edukacije. Pa ja sam se educirala na HTV-u, non stop smo išli na edukacije. Mislim, ja znam da je edukacija bilo. I HTV članica Eurovizije ima puno više mogućnosti nego što ima. Morana će znat, ja sam bila članica IBU News Committee, pa je Morana bila. Sad više nemamo nikog u IBU News Committee, što je sramota.